Hey friends, it's Allison here, jumping in real quick before you get into all the juicy details of today's episode. Did you know there is just one more week left to our 200th episode giveaway where you have the chance to win a full ride scholarship to the Better Belly Blueprint? This is the way to heal your gut so that you can poop daily, ditch acid reflux, and balance your hormones even when nothing else has worked. Here's how you can enter. Leave a rating and review on the Better Belly podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify between now and May 29th. Take a screenshot of that rating and review, then go to betterbellytherapies.com/giveaway and fill out our 200th episode giveaway form. You will automatically receive an email with a code for $200 off the Better Belly Blueprint, which you're going to get as soon as you send in that form. And then a full scholarship winner is going to be announced on May 30th and messaged by email. If you win, you're going to win a full scholarship to the Better Belly Blueprint. And if you don't win, you can still get $200 off, which is 20% off of the Better Belly Blueprint if you join by May 31st at midnight. So go ahead and leave a rating and review. Get that giveaway form filled out at betterbellytherapies.com/giveaway, and you can finally end your constipation, acid reflux, and PMS for good. This month, we've been going through a series on fascia and how this untalked about connective tissue in the body can massively impact gut health. Fascia is the key structure I work with in our clinic at Better Belly Therapies using craniosacral therapy and visceral manipulation. And it's the other half of the work we do at Better Belly Therapies alongside our functional lab testing in our foundations program. On today's episode, you are going to hear about Sydney, a real client in my clinic who recently worked with me for 3 months doing both craniosacral therapy and visceral manipulation and functional lab testing to completely reverse her gut health troubles. When I met Sydney, she was struggling with chronic gastric pain, constipation and diarrhea, bloating, fatigue, and waking up in the middle of the night constantly. She was on a restricted diet, which was recommended by her doctor, but it wasn't getting her results, and nothing else she tried was healing her gut. As a grad student and PhD candidate, Sydney needed her body to be at top performance to focus on her studies and research. But no matter what she did, she wasn't getting better. Cue entrance to Better Belly Therapies. In my office, we did a physical evaluation as well as used the same evaluative methods I use with my virtual clients and determined that Sydney needed both hands-on therapy of visceral manipulation and craniosacral therapy, along with functional lab testing to address the root cause of her gut health problems. Using these methods in just 3 months, Sydney now has no constipation and diarrhea, no stomach pain, and she's now regularly sleeping through the night. If you want to learn more about fascia and what we're talking about here with craniosacral therapy and visceral manipulation, check out our Fascia 101 episode 90 to learn more about what fascia is, why you should care about it, how you can know if your fascia is impacting your gut health, and if so, what you can do about it. But for now, let's jump into Sydney's story. Awesome. Well, guys, I am so excited today to be welcoming onto the podcast my client, Sydney. Sydney is a client of mine who's worked with me both in our foundations program, doing functional lab testing, as well as in office, getting visceral manipulation and craniosacral therapy. I love it whenever we get clients who are able to do both. So she is local to us. And Sydney has recently finished her work and her period of working with us. And she was willing to share her story on the podcast. So, Sydney, thank you so much for coming on to the Better Belly podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, Sydney, I would love to start with our first question, which is just orienting us when you started working with us, or kind of before you even started working with us at Better Belly Therapies. What was going on in your health?
So, I have dealt with basically chronic constipation. I would say, like, any form of abdominal discomfort, whether it be just stomach pain after eating or bloating and gas after eating, and had talked to doctors about it, but was basically just told that I have IBS and would have to alleviate symptoms with diets, and had tried diets, but nothing was really permanently helping.
Yes. And you just named several symptoms here, but were any of these your top 5 symptoms, or is there anything that you didn't list just now that was also a top 5 symptom for you of like the 5 things that were aggravating you the most?
Yeah, so I definitely the bloating, the constipation, and the pain were bad, but other things that were kind of newer to me was like fatigue. I felt like I was tired in the afternoons more often than when I was younger. And I started waking up in the middle of the night, like 2, 3 a.m., which had never happened to me before. I was such a good sleeper.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was just weird things popping up that I was like, this doesn't feel right.
Right. And do you mind sharing with the listeners what stage of life you're in right now? I feel like sleep is really important. I mean, it's always important, but I'm especially thinking of your stage of life. What are you going through right now?
Yeah, I am a 5th-year graduate student in a PhD program. And so I am, I need the sleep to be able to function throughout the day. I've got my, a lot of brain power going. And when I'm tired, it makes everything more challenging.
Yes. So when you showed up to our office, I was like, girl, we got to help you. You like, it's like, it's a fight uphill to finish a, master's degree, PhD candidacy already. And then I'm like, and then you're in pain and sleep deprived.
Yeah. It was just like, I wanted so badly for the, final push to be, I don't know, not racked with health issues as well.
Right. And you mean by final push, that kind of last finishing up your dissertation and stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which you are in right now. Would you say that you hit that goal?
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. I love it. It's like a happy ending, but we're not even there yet. And actually, what I want to ask before we kind of get to more of the happier stuff is, what had you tried? So it sounds like you had talked to doctors, you tried diet. Was there anything else that you had tried prior to starting this?
Not much beyond different diets. I tried the specific carbohydrate diet, and that one was the only one that kind of helped. But the second I would eat something that was, off the diet, I had my symptoms come back. And that one, my mom and sister had also tried it, and they said, yeah, just do it for a couple months and then you'll be good. But I did it for almost 6 months, and I still, after the fact, was having symptoms.
Are you talking about, when you said specific carbohydrate, talking about the low FODMAP?
I think it's very similar. There might be a couple changes, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty similar. It's like no grains, low sugar, that sort of thing.
Okay. Interesting. I don't think I knew that. I had in my mind maybe that you'd done the low FODMAP, but I knew that you had already tried extensively controlling your symptoms with diet. And really the big thing at Better Belly, on the Better Belly podcast, as well as in our office, is that food is not the enemy. Like some foods, yes, you'll find out, okay, that might be a permanent thing. But a lot of times when you just like more and more and more and more and more foods are like hurting you. And then also, being on these restricted diets where the diets, literally the purpose of it is to quote unquote heal you. And then it's not, it's 100% pointing to the fact that there's a different root cause.
Right.
So you came into our office and I was like, let's do some testing. How was that for you when I was initially suggested that? I don't know. Had you listened to the podcast? Were you prepped at all for that?
I had listened to a few things, but not really prepped. I was excited though, because as a scientist, I like having like concrete answers, whereas, you can make guesses based on symptoms, but if you have actual data to base decisions off of, I feel like that is a great place to start. So I was excited, nervous and excited.
That's good. Can you share with our listeners, or are you willing to share what type of scientist you are?
Yeah, I am a chemical biologist. Which is the study of biology using chemical tools. My specific area of research is developing an assay or a way of detecting protein RNA interactions in cells.
Which is so cool. And I when I heard you say that come in, I was like, I'm going to throw all the science at you, because there's so much to science. So I'm sure I knew you wouldn't know everything I would say, but I was like, but you will appreciate that there's a word for this and that there's like a concept behind it. I can remember our first visceral manipulation appointment, just like throwing stuff at you. And I was like, I hope you appreciate this. You seem to. And I guess you even said just now, yes, it made you very excited to get some real data.
I absolutely did enjoy it. It's so fun to hear the physiology behind, what is going on. And it made a lot of sense. And it helped me make connections to, other things that I was feeling in my body as well.
Like what type of things?
Well, when we talked about the gut breath connection, that was a big moment for me, because I had asthma growing up, and it was weirdly enough kind of associated with eating gluten for me. And so I haven't been having what you'd call asthma attacks forever, but I've always felt somewhat limited in my lung capacity. And when we were talking about, how bloating creates, or I guess it disturbs the correct balance of pressure in the chest versus in the stomach, and how that could affect breathing, how maybe being perpetually bloated was affecting the way that I was breathing during exercise, or even just, regularly. And then when I started to feel a difference in my stomach, and I felt a difference in my physical activity, I was like, this is incredible. And I don't know if I would have made that connection as quickly had we not been, talking about all these different connections within the body.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the benefits of doing both functional lab testing and visceral manipulation and craniosacral therapy, is we were able to work with some restrictions you really did have in your body, actually, particularly in your thorax, which again, people who have history of asthma or any type of, bronchitis, pneumonia, any type of upper respiratory illness, whether again, it's, asthma, which isn't quite like infection, but it is like a difficulty that the body has to overcome, or just a straight up infection. That infections and again, asthma really will then also cause it can cause bloating itself, or it can cause GI pressure imbalances. So acid reflux and difficulty moving food through the GI tract. So who knows, like maybe some of the GI stuff started when some of the asthma stuff started. But then you can also kind of rewind it and improve both at the same time.
Yeah. Very cool.
And I'll do a quick shout out to the podcast episode we have called the Gut Breath Connection. I believe it's episode 46. I might be like 47 or something like that, but we will put it in the show notes as well. So y'all listening can get a little bit more in depth of what Sydney is referring to. All right. So Sydney, what are your symptoms like now? I know we've kind of talked around you had chronic constipation, bloating, gas, pain, that fatigue, you weren't sleeping well. What to actually, I would be really interested. Take us on a journey. What did it look like for you healing wise from day one of starting to work with us?
Yeah, from basically the first week, when the first kind of supplements that I was adding into my program was the liver support. And I feel like even just that within the first week, I was feeling much less bloated and felt like I had a little bit more energy. And then going through the pathogen protocol, it was very obvious when my body was like, oh, yep, we're getting rid of things. And while that wasn't always comfortable, it ended up like the end result has been fantastic. And I really do. I feel like I can tolerate foods much better, like even meals that maybe were more challenging for me to digest before. I'm having a fine time eating, which is wonderful and exactly what I wanted. And I don't exactly remember when it started, but after probably a month or so, I was able to sleep through the night again much more easily. And still, I don't wake up at the 2-3 a.m. mark anymore.
Liver hour, liver time.
Which is wonderful. I feel much more rested. And I was noticing that at 2-3 p.m. I wasn't feeling so tired, and I felt like I didn't need an afternoon nap every day. I also think that after meals, just the not having to be afraid of being in pain after meals was so great.
Yeah. And I was about to say, I remember the first time you came into my office and I was like, whoa, we're making a difference. It might've been like the second or third appointment, just like enough time for you to really get rolling with your protocol. Like your eyes were just like, you were just sitting up and looked so just alert. It was great. I was like, okay, we're making a difference. This is awesome. And the other thing that comes to mind is we have a podcast episode where I talk about like the sleep gut connection. It's not called that. Can't call everything the blanket gut connection. Though they're all connected. But there's a podcast episode. We'll put it in the show notes. It's called 6 Secrets Your Sleep is Telling You About Your Gut. And you were basically having firsthand experience of that gut sleep problem. Even though it probably didn't feel straight connected, you weren't like waking up. Sometimes people wake up and they do have gut pain and they're like, feels like my gut's waking me up. But it was your liver and there's other things going on there. So good. So yeah, you went through some hard times and that had to do with detoxing and die off and just the fact that basically pathogens don't like dying. They'll fight back a little bit. So there can be kind of a period of time where you're like, oh, I do feel a little bit more. I don't know what your main symptoms were. Do you remember what your like die off symptoms were generally?
My main die off symptom was loose stool and like having to go more frequently.
Which is funny after being constipated.
Yeah, it was a big difference. And there wasn't a ton of like actual pain and discomfort, which I know can happen, but there's maybe a week very early on where I had more headaches, but that went away also very quickly once things kind of settled.
Right. Yes, exactly. So it's like this kind of temporary thing. It's not because what you're doing is harming yourself. It's not because it's not working, but it's just very intentional and then it goes away. So good. What are your symptoms like generally now? I mean, is there anything, I mean, it sounds like you've already started to share with us, like you can eat meals. You're not afraid of meals. Is there anything else that you haven't mentioned yet that is kind of part of your current life?
I don't think so. The biggest thing has been being less afraid of eating and having more freedom to eat. It's really hard to have a restrictive diet, especially when you're traveling or if you're at school functions, there's often nothing to eat. And so being able to, feel included in those types of meals has been really exciting again. And having more energy is also very exciting. I feel like the, darker circles under my eyes went away. I unfortunately have given myself them again from a couple sleepless nights going out, but I'm gonna get back to it.
Right. But that was at least a choice, not like
Yeah.
I chose to go to bed and my body's like, wake up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's really nice to also not be afraid of being tired in the morning because I can't sleep.
Yes. Oh, so good. One question I have here, and you might have already answered it, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to it. Was there anything in particular that made you want to work with us at Better Belly Therapies, whether it's like how you found out about us or just like what our approach was like, or yeah, I don't know what it was. What was your experience like that made you say, yes, I want to work with these people?
Yeah, so I was actually just searching for visceral manipulation in the area because I had seen someone that my mom went to in California. And I mean, it was only when I was home visiting. So it was just one session. But even in that one session, I feel like there were parts of my gut that were, realigned, and it helped things move more smoothly. And I felt like beyond, like, similar to how you need a chiropractor for your bones or whatever, I feel like my body, my organs needed readjusting. And so was excited to find someone doing visceral manipulation. And then when I just Googled and found Better Bellies, I was like, this is perfect, because not only is it, maybe like back pain or whatever might be happening, it's a lot of my stomach. And I was really excited to work with people who wanted to find the root cause of, gut health, because I am a very strong believer that, our gut health is so important. And yes, it is what we eat, but also there's, as a biologist, as I know that there's things in there. And the the balance of what is in there is so important to how our bodies work. So I was excited to find someone who had the same beliefs and actually did
Yes.
something about it.
Yes, beliefs and the tools and like the knowledge, it all comes wrapped up. And I say that not to like toot my own horn, but it's like what I was looking for when I was trying to get healthy. It's kind of a hard package to get. Like maybe they believe you, but they don't have the tool to like, or not believe you. Maybe someone's like in the same boat as you as far as understanding the gut, but they don't have a tool for it, or they have a tool for it, but they don't have a good solution once they get data from that tool or whatever it is. And so kind of the combination is something that I've explicitly sought out, because it's like, we need this, we need all of it. Not just like, oh, your gut's important to you as like a theoretical or general truth. So that's good. And I forgot that you'd already had visceral manipulation because of your experience in California. So I love that. I mean, and one of the things that's interesting that I'll point out is that some of our clients only need visceral manipulation. It kind of depends on what their problem is, what their symptoms are, what their health history. That's how we use all of that to kind of look at what's going on. And you very much benefited, and I would say needed both. I think if you'd only done visceral manipulation, you would have been a little bit on a hamster wheel. And I probably said that to you of like, hey, I know you came here for visceral manipulation. I'm going to tell you though, I highly recommend functional lab testing and adding in, diet change, supplements, whatever needs to happen from the lab testing. But on top of that, the visceral manipulation, when I did your evaluation, I'm like, you do have restrictions in your thorax, like again, in your rib cage. And you're going to kind of benefit from getting both, and you'll be really, really set up well by doing both. And I think sometimes people, at least because both are so familiar or new, like I've never heard of visceral manipulation, and I've also never heard of these functional lab tests. It can be a little overwhelming. Like, I need both. Are you sure? But would you say that you feel like both were helpful to you?
Absolutely. I think that both, I don't think I would have felt the same changes with one or the other. I think both was really necessary. to feel better. Definitely the labs made a lot of sense, and we made decisions based on those labs, and so that would not have happened without that. And I think being able to pinpoint locations in my body that were giving me issues, and also learning what sort of exercises or small practices I could do on my own to help improve things, like that wouldn't have happened if we'd just done the labs.
Yes. Yeah. And I did give you some self-care that was really, I always get really excited about self-care because, it's subtle, like what we teach with visceral stretching and visceral breathing in our office. It's so subtle. It's sort of like yoga. I don't know if you can feel when I say it's sort of like yoga, but it's totally different. Like how we really had you focus on different things in your body. Do you have anything you would add or share about the visceral breathing and visceral stretching, like what it was like to learn those techniques, or kind of any body awareness that you felt like growth that you went through with that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the weirdest sensations for me was using muscles, or doing things that didn't seem very challenging but were actually quite complicated for my body to pick up on. For example, the neck plank. It was so simple, but I feel like those muscles were so they were so weak, or I don't know, or maybe just were so strained that I had such a hard time with that at the beginning. And then like building up that ability was really interesting and exciting for me. And also just, what we do or what you have me do in a lot of the sessions is channel my breath to specific parts of my body. And it was interesting for me to see how, like, what my natural state is. And I breathe a lot in my chest. I don't breathe a lot in my belly. And so practicing breathing into my belly and like stretching out that area and like allowing my breath to be more full was really interesting and I think very helpful.
And also, one of the things I love to point out with that breathing into the belly thing, because we do hear that, like, breathe into your belly. And I can't remember if this is something that you had experienced, but a lot of times clients like yourself who have restrictions and the diaphragm can't lift or drop fully, they hate that instruction. They've been to some breathing class or some yoga meditation or something. And they're like, I hate that when someone says breathe into my belly, because it's hard, or it actually makes me feel, maybe some people report my back feels tight after I do that. Or I don't feel relaxed, which are like, I'm here for relaxation. And that's a sign that you actually have a visceral restriction. So we would be able to do our visceral manipulation throughout most of that session and end it, and where you actually were having more productivity in your belly breathing, not just feeling frustrated. Because I don't want people to get the idea of like, I was just telling you to breathe into your belly. We were like giving you tools and like, so that you wouldn't feel so frustrated.
Yeah. And you can feel the change, like as the session progressed. I was like, oh, I can now actually send more breath to my belly, and it didn't feel as weird in other parts of my body. And
what other parts of your body do you remember?
It was often my back.
Yes.
I felt like I was always like pulling or putting tension in my back, my upper back, when I was breathing into my belly, but then slowly that faded. And also just feeling like I had more capacity to, send the breath down there.
Yeah. No, and what you're experiencing is when the diaphragm can't drop and you really try to push into the belly, then that air pressure, because it can't go, because the diaphragm cannot drop for whatever the reason is. There's lots of options when it comes to the diaphragm, but it can't drop. It'll get pushed somewhere else. And so it might get pushed up to the top of the ribs. So you'll get upper shoulder tension, might get pushed to the back. You'll get upper back tension. It might get pushed to where the attachment of the diaphragm is, which it attaches to rib 11 and 12, which is like very much mid back. And then also the first and second lumbar vertebra, which is a little bit starting to head into the lower back. And so you can kind of see how actually breathing problems and GI problems. And like you came with GI, but you had all these other things, and we're like, we're going to deal with all of it.
Yeah. It's all connected.
I had another call recently. We called it bonuses. These were the bonus. You came in for the constipation and gas and bloating, and you got all these bonuses.
They're wonderful bonuses.
So good. Well, what are some of the, and I don't know, I feel like we're already covering this a little bit, but just want to ask in case anything else comes up for you. What are some of the biggest things you've learned about your body and your health since working with us?
I would say that the biggest thing that I've learned is like, well, honestly, a big thing was actually trusting myself and being able to kind of believe what I'm feeling and know that what I am feeling, like some weird change, when something feels different, it actually is true, not just me, making it up or whatever, or being sensitive. And that was really helpful to have someone validate that, what I'm feeling is actually real. And there is often a solution to that. And so that's a big thing that I think I learned, and I'm still kind of learning as we go. And I would say the breath thing is also, that was a huge learning for me from this process. And I'm not sure what else.
I mean, those are two great things. I mean, I love what you're saying, just being able to trust yourself. I hear it a million times and it always makes me sad and then excited, of course, as you see the transition. But when you're having chronic health problems that the conventional health system has tried to address and just hasn't, and then of course you have like family members, like you talked about your mom and sister saying, look, this thing worked for us. Why isn't it working for you? Sometimes other people can suggest either implicitly or explicitly that maybe you're just kind of making things up, or like maybe, or sometimes they don't need to say anything at all. And you're trying to figure out logically, how am I in this place when everybody else said XYZ should work? This diet should work.
Yeah.
This, test should work. This antibiotic, whatever should work. Deep breathing at my yoga meditation should work. And when you work with somebody who can validate you and then explain it, not just validate, like pat you on the head and be like, yeah, you're right, your life is rough. It's like, no, here's your problem, and you're not crazy, and your body makes sense. You feel at peace with your body. You're like, oh my gosh, like, and then you can trust yourself a whole lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a lot of like cognitive dissonance out of just daily living.
Yeah, it definitely relieves so much stress from like, feeling like there's something broken or there's something unfixable about my body.
And then having to pretend it's all okay while you do your deep RNA biology.
Right.
One thing
right.
One thing I remember asking you, and I don't know if there's like an update or and I don't actually fully remember your response. I remember a little bit of it, but could you tell our listeners what it was like for your family to watch you go through these changes? And I don't know if there's also maybe a coworker or boss or anybody else who kind of knew what you were going through, but I know your family was a part of that. What did you get any feedback from them as you were going through this process, either from what you were telling them or any changes they were observing in you?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I was excited about and shared with them was like, I don't feel bloated after eating. I feel like I can eat more regularly now. And they were also very excited about that, because it's been something that, kind of we all have struggled with for a while. And so to be able to kind of kick that out the door was really exciting. I remember also talking to another friend about this, and I was telling her, I was like, yeah, I kind of feel uncomfortable and pain almost after every meal. And she was like, and I think we must have like eaten pizza or something. And she's like, oh man, I ate too much. And I was like, I don't feel great. And she's like, you feel like this after every meal all the time? And I was like, yeah, kind of, I do. And I'm now very happy to report that I don't. And so that's been really exciting.
That's so good. Got two final questions for you. So one of them is, were you at all scared to begin working with us? And fear can manifest in a couple of different ways. And if yes, like what was that scaredness or nervousness about?
I think a lot of it came from, and I wasn't, too afraid. I was very excited to start. I was a little nervous, but a lot of the, I guess, fear and nerves came from a hope, like finding a result. I was really scared I would find a result that meant that there was something permanently wrong with me, or that, to find something scary. I have, a lot of family that have more like permanent chronic issues. And so I was like, what if we find something? What if I have some sort of, I don't know, incurable disease because we can't find a solution, or because there aren't answers in my labs? Or maybe there are terrible answers in my labs, who knows?
Right.
It was, I guess, going into the unknown, which is not something I'm used to. But I think I think that was the biggest part of my fear.
Okay. Yeah. And there's probably, I'm trying to think, there's maybe 3 top fears that we hear from people. And that's one of them is, what if my labs don't show anything? Thus far, we really don't get labs that just show nothing. The other thing, yeah, like what if my lab shows something incurable? And I don't know how much we really dove into it. I know I can remember talking about you bringing up your family members and some just chronic illness in there. And I'm pretty sure that I had said something like, yeah, a lot of times chronic illness is actually, you can actually get someone to go into remission with the chronic illness, but it does require more of a holistic approach, not just like, we're going to give you a medication. And I think I'd said basically what you're doing now is setting you up to either delay or at least be able to like really put into remission the opportunity for you to develop a, autoimmune condition or whatever it is. These things that might be genetically predisposed to, but when you get rid of just the chronic inflammation and food sensitivities and leaky gut and pathogens, you're kind of setting yourself up for that to not happen. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it definitely eased my fears, and also helped me feel proactive in my health, and taking a step to make sure that I stay okay.
Right. You can't change your family members' actions, but you can change yourself. Yeah. So that's so good. We have never had someone just like do a bunch of labs with us, partly because we are picky. We're not just going to be like, oh yeah, we'll just do labs for anyone. But really it's kind of like, oh nope, you're right in our little, focal area. We're going to find something, because that's how this works. That's how science works. Would you say that? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Like, your experience?
That's exactly how science works.
Right. You just had lost a little bit of faith in your body. You're like, but is that how my body works?
Yeah.
So good. Well, our last question here today, Sydney, if you could share one thing to encourage a woman who is listening to this podcast right now regarding her health, what would it be?
Similar to what we talked about earlier, I'd say it's so important to listen to your body and trust yourself, and then surround yourself with people and help and resources that can help you achieve your goals, whatever health goals it is. I feel like there's so many people and things out there that are telling you there's a quick easy fix, or it's just this, you have to deal with it. And I think it's so important to find help that will actually identify the underlying cause, rather than putting a Band-Aid on it, and support you through that process.
So good. So good. Well, Sydney, thank you so much again for coming on to the Better Belly podcast, sharing your story, being with us. Honestly, I think as you're like approaching like literally the end of your program, you gave us some of your time today. And it's so encouraging to hear your story. And I know our listeners are going to be encouraged as well.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, guys. Was that an amazing episode or what? I am so glad that Sydney was willing to jump onto the podcast and just share her story. She's also not the only one. She's one of our many, many clients who've been able to find the root cause of their gut health and just stop spinning their wheels. If you are local to us in Metro Detroit region and you want to be physically evaluated, you want to see if craniosacral therapy, visceral manipulation, and or functional lab testing are right for you to get you the results you want in your gut health, I would invite you to book a new client evaluation. You can use the link in the show notes or go to betterbellytherapies.com/book-now. And if you are a virtual client and you want to work with us, we work with clients across the US and Canada, and you can apply for our Foundations Program waitlist today. Just go to betterbellytherapies.com/waitlist or click the link in the show notes. Also, if you had a question that came up during today's episode, something that Sydney mentioned or I mentioned, if you have a question that you just feel like hasn't been talked about on the podcast, I would invite you to go to betterbellytherapies.com/askallison. We have a super easy way for you to record your voice and send a quick question. You can do it anonymously, you can share your name, and you may be featured on the Better Belly podcast and get your burning question answered directly from me. And in other news, if you love this episode, we have even more coming down the line. So subscribe so you never miss a beat. And if you thought of a friend while you were listening, as always, I just want to encourage you to take a screenshot and share it with that friend. I cannot count how many times when I tell someone I'm a gut health therapist, they say, "Oh, I know someone who needs you." So send that friend you thought of a love note to their gut and do us a favor and pass this podcast along to them. Other ways that you can support us is by leaving a rating and review on our Apple iTunes podcast. We have a quick link in the show notes so you can access that super easily. And lastly, if you want to stay in the know and connect with us further, you can stay in the conversation by following us on Instagram at Better Belly Therapies. I love connecting with our listeners, and it means so much if you drop by and said hi. And as a reminder, our motto: miracles are immediate, but healing takes time. Catch you guys next week.